When the cameras turned toward Kieran Doyle at the Eastbridge Youth Innovation Gala, Lena Ashford was still smiling. For a year she had written his speeches, rebuilt his slides, and polished his answers while he called it teamwork. Everyone knew they were dating. She had believed that when he stood under the lights, he would at least look for her. Instead, he thanked Celeste Rowan. She made this project worthy of the judges, Kieran said, smiling at the elegant student council vice president in the front row. We have already decided to continue it together after graduation. Some people cheer from the sidelines. Some people build the future. The screen behind him flashed photos from the project process. Lena was in none of them, though. The original idea had begun in her notebook. Laughter broke somewhere in the student section. Her phone filled with messages. The host, sensing blood, turned to the audience. Provincial mock exam champion Elias Winter is here tonight. Elias, if you had to choose one classmate to join your research group next year, who would it be? A murmur moved through the hall. Elias Winter sat 6 rows ahead, near the aisle. He had the sort of face people described as severe until he smiled, which he almost never did in public. He was tall, always, in an immaculate uniform, first in mathematics, first in physics, first in the sort of self-discipline that made other students irrationally afraid of him. Teachers loved him, rivals resented him, and most of the school thought he would leave Eastbridge like a meteor leaving a field of grass behind, brilliant and untouchable. He did not stand immediately. He looked first at the stage, then at the screen, then unexpectedly over his shoulder toward the back rows where Lena stood. His voice, when it came, was calm enough to make the silence louder. Lena Ashford, he said, provided she stops ghostwriting for mediocrity and starts putting her own name on her work. A few people gasped. A few laughed because they did not know what else to do. Kieran's smile flickered. Celeste turned, startled. The host nearly dropped his cue cards from sheer delight. Lena did not hear the next question. The stage lights stretched into white lines. The last thing she saw was Elias looking at her not with pity, but with recognition. Then the floor rose to meet her. When Lena came back to herself, she expected antiseptic. Instead, she smelled chalk dust and winter. Sunlight. A fan rattled overhead. Someone was solving chemistry at the board. She lifted her head too fast and nearly collided with the person beside her. Welcome back to the living Elias Winter, said, sliding a folded square of paper across the desk. Lena stared at him. This was impossible for several reasons. First, because Elias Winter was not supposed to be sitting next to her. He had always occupied the front row in the advanced seminar class, far from ordinary mortals, and especially far from girls who wasted a year writing speeches for boys who mistook theft for charm. Second, because the blackboard date read January 12th, nearly 5 months before the gala. Third, because she recognized the exact page open in front of her. Her disastrous winter term calculus quiz. The one she had scored 58 on because she had spent the previous night editing
Kieran's project statement.
Her breath caught. Elias tapped the note with one long finger. You asked me to use this if you fell asleep again. With shaking hands, Lena opened the note. If I doze off in class, tap the desk twice. If I still do not wake up, pinch my sleeve. Do not be kind. L.A. Her own handwriting. Definitely her own handwriting. Petty, narrow, slightly slanted when she was anxious. The chalk snapped at the front of the room. Lena looked from the note to the date to Elias again. He frowned. If you have forgotten your own instructions, that is concerning even by your standards. A clear female voice spoke inside Lena's head. Reconstruction. Complete. Please remain calm, it said. You requested a second attempt. Your request has been granted. Cold ran through her fingers. Who are you? Margin interface, the voice replied. A learning support system keyed to your revised timeline. Call me Margin. At the bottom of her quiz paper, a faint silver shimmer appeared, visible only to her. Synchronization target available. Seatmate. Primary method. Inquiry. Warning. Imitation without understanding will yield unstable gains. Lena blinked. Seatmate. She turned toward Elias again so abruptly that he lifted one eyebrow. What? He asked. The words burst out of her before caution could stop them. Why are you sitting here? Because Ms. Danner rearranged the room after the winter rankings. He gestured with his pen. And because you're apparently allergic to the front half of the classroom. Lena looked around. He was right. This was not the elite seminar room at all, but the regular class section that had been reorganized after exams. Several top students had been redistributed as peer anchors to improve the academic ecosystem, a phrase the administration loved and students hated. Then she remembered there had been a reshuffle. She had barely cared the first time, because Kieran had complained that sitting farther away from her would reduce his efficiency, and she had spent most of that day angling for a seat he liked. A slow, dangerous clarity settled over her. This really was January. This really was her second chance, and Kieran Doyle had not yet ruined her, publicly because she had not yet handed him everything he wanted. Margin spoke. Again, you may choose a support route. Route A, remain attached to Kieran Doyle. Outcome probability, repeated. Self-erasure. Route B, align with image management. Outcome probability, unstable. Self-worth. Route C, develop independent capability through disciplined cognition. Current target, Elias Winter. Lena did not even let the system finish. Route C, she thought. Selection confirmed. A thin line of warmth moved through her right wrist, then disappeared. On the edge of Elias's notebook for a blink, Lena thought she saw tiny marks, like constellations rearranging themselves. Then the teacher called on her. Mims Ashford, said Mr. Crowley, not kindly. Since you were kind enough to rejoin us, perhaps you would like to solve question 3. 30 heads turned. Lena stood on unsteady legs and walked to the board. The first time she had lived. This day she had guessed, stumbled, and gone red under the laughter of 3 boys in the back row. Then Kieran had texted her afterward, you need to stop embarrassing yourself in quantitative classes. It makes it harder to defend you. Now she looked at the equation and felt the old panic begin to rise. Immediately, a silver annotation appeared in the corner of her vision. What is being conserved? What changes form, not amount, start with? What cannot disappear? The questions did not give her the answer. They did something stranger and far more useful. They pointed her mind in the right direction. Lena took the chalk. 3 lines in, she remembered the balancing method. 6 lines in, she heard the room go quiet. When she set down the chalk, Mr. Crowley adjusted his glasses and said, with clear reluctance, correct, on her. Walked back to her seat. She heard a soft sound beside her. Not laughter. A quiet tap of a pen against wood. Approval. Brief and precise. Elias did not look at her when she sat down, but he slid his notebook a little closer so she could see the layout of the next problem. Under the desk, Lena clenched her fingers until her nails marked her palm. This time she promised herself she would not spend a year becoming invisible inside someone else's ambition. At lunch, she broke up with Kieran in under 90 seconds. He intercepted her outside the media room with his usual practiced concern already arranged on his face. You skipped rehearsal this morning. I had to present the sponsor deck without your edits. Lena almost laughed. That voice had once worked on her. It had always arrived dressed as disappointment, never anger, because anger would have admitted she mattered. Disappointment implied she had failed an important person. She had bent around that implication for months. Now all she could see was technique. I'm not editing your sponsor deck anymore, she said. Kieran stared. Excuse me, I'm not writing your speeches either. His expression tightened. Are you upset about that? Seating change, Lena. Do not be childish. You know this semester matters. If you want us both to survive admission season, you have to stop making everything
emotional. U.S.
The word felt like grime. Lena folded her arms. There is no us. He blinked once. Taken.
Off script. What? I am breaking up with.
You? Students passed them in clusters, slower than necessary. Eastbridge hallways were built for acoustics and gossip. Kieran lowered his voice. You are doing this because I asked Celeste to help with the grant forms are not you. She is better at administrative language than you are. That is not an insult. It is specialization.
There it was, the little
Knife hidden in a reasonable sentence. Lena smiled so suddenly that he seemed relieved. Then she said, you are right. She can have the grant forms. You can have the speeches you write by yourself. Good luck discovering how hard your ideas have to work when my sentences are not carrying them. His face changed.
Not wounded.
Never wounded. Alarmed.
Lena,
he said, sharper now. Don't be dramatic. I am not. She stepped around him. I am redistributing resources. Behind her, he called her name once, twice, then with growing anger. She did not turn back. When she entered the cafeteria, her heart was pounding so violently she could hear it in her ears. Margin spoke in a tone almost suspiciously. Pleased. Dependency thread severed. Cognitive leakage reduced. Lena stared at the lunch trays lined under the fluorescent lights. I am not a leaking pipe, she muttered, under her breath. The lunch lady looked up.
What was that, dear? Nothing.
Soup, please. By the end of the first week in her second life, Lena had confirmed 3 things. First, the margin interface did not hand her knowledge. It behaved like a ruthless private tutor who refused to do her work for her. Whenever she tried to simply stare at Elias's notes and hope genius would seep into her skull through proximity, the silver annotations vanished. When she asked a real question, why does this theorem depend on symmetry? Why is this conclusion valid but not the simpler version? What assumption am I making without noticing the annotations multiplied, guiding her toward structure rather than answers? Second, Elias Winter was not kind in any conventional sense. He was blunt, unsentimental, and seemingly unaware that other students could die from one of his silences, but he was precise in a way that made precision feel like respect. If a question was foolish, he said so. If a question was brave, he answered it completely. Third, she had been much better than she remembered. This discovery unsettled her more than anything else, because once Kieran was gone from the center of her schedule, empty spaces appeared like exposed
floorboards.
2 hours after school,
40
minutes before first period. The whole of Saturday afternoon, she filled them first with panic, then with revision plans, then with stacks of old papers she had once hidden because low scores were easier to survive then. Evidence of wasted potential. In literature, she still wrote with startling clarity when she forgot to doubt herself. In history, she saw patterns other students memorized as disconnected dates. In mathematics, she was slower but not hopeless. In science, she had holes, not
ruins.
You read too fast when you are nervous, Elias told her one Tuesday as they worked through a proof set after class. Lena, pencil in hand, frowned at
him.
That is not a recognized academic diagnosis. It is when you skip the line. That defines the variable and then act. Betrayed by the universe, she opened her mouth to argue, then looked back at the page and groaned. I did skip it. Elias nodded once as if the universe had been restored. She eyed him. You enjoy this far too much. Watching preventable disasters, his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. Immensely. The silver annotation glimmered at the edge of her notebook. Notice the rhythm of correction? He does not rescue the answer. He rescues your attention. Lena's pencil stilled. For a moment, she looked at Elias. Differently, not as an unreachable prodigy, or a rescue route selected by a magical interface, but as a person whose mind had been trained to honor process more than performance. Someone who believed focus could be taught. It did something dangerous to her pulse. She bent over the proof before he could. Notice. Her rank rose from 83rd to 59th by February. Kieran noticed. He cornered her outside assembly with a smile that suggested patience and a jaw that suggested murder. You have been busy. I have been awake, Lena said. He glanced at the practice tests in her arms. You're making things awkward.
No, she
said. I'm making things separate. Don't do that tone with me.
What?
Tone. The one you use when you think.
You have changed.
She met his eyes. I have. For half a second something almost honest appeared on his face. Not regret. Not apology. Fear. Then Celeste Rowan approached, carrying a stack of student council folders against her chest. Am I interrupting, Kieran? Recovered instantly. Not at all. Celeste looked from him to Lena and took in the entire scene in one glance. Lena had forgotten how frighteningly quick she was. I need Kieran for the district proposal, Celeste said. Then to Lena, with a courteous nod, your essay in the school journal was excellent. It took Lena a beat to understand the school journal, her anonymous piece from last week, and editorial arguing that Eastbridge's scholarship culture rewarded display over contribution. She had submitted it under initials. Apparently Celeste had recognized the style. Thank you, Lena said carefully. Celeste's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Agreement, perhaps. Or
warning.
Then she walked away with Kieran, and he followed because that was what ambitious boys did when confronted by girls who improved their optics. Margin whispered. New data point, your former rival may not be the enemy you assigned to her. Lena watched them disappear down the hall. I did not assign anyone as anything. Historical review suggests otherwise. Don't get smug, Lena muttered. At the beginning of March, she made the mistake of trying to optimize the system. It happened because she was tired. Elias had spent 2 afternoons at a regional mathematics training camp and 1 day at a family obligation he referred to only as an annual banquet where adults compare teenagers like racehorses. Without him beside her, the silver annotations dulled. Lena hated how much she noticed. So when 3 top students from other sections stayed late in the library, she decided to test the system's limits. If proximity to discipline cognition improved her learning, then why not diversify? The results were catastrophic in ways both educational and humiliating. Marta Sue, ranked 5th in chemistry, agreed to explain acid-base titration only after Lena listened to a 10-minute rant about her ex-girlfriend joining the fencing captain. The explanation was brilliant, but so fast that Lena absorbed 2 useful concepts and 1 opinion about emotionally stunted athletes. Jin Park, debate champion, promised to help with rhetorical analysis if Lena timed his mock speech and told him whether his tragic pause before civilization felt earned. It did not. He took offense. The margin interface flashed weakly and gave her a single annotation. False. Confidence is contagious. Theo Barnes, who was excellent at statistics and unbearable in all known dimensions, said, I will help if you admit I'm the only reason our generation still respects graphs. Lena left the library 40 minutes later with a headache, 3 contradictory note styles, and a profound longing for Elias's merciless economy. The next day she returned to her desk and found 3 new mechanical pencils lined up beside her textbook. She stared at
them.
Elias continued working through a physics worksheet. Did you put these here? Lena asked.
No, he said.
She
waited.
Then he added, Jun said you lent him one and never asked for it back. Theo broke yours while talking with his.
Hands.
Marta said your current pencil. Sounds like a dying insect. Lena turned slowly toward him. You coordinated? Restitution. I prevented noise. You are terrifying. So I have heard. She looked at the pencils again, then at him. Did you also hear I abandoned you for better academic options this time? He actually paused. The room around them kept moving, pages turning, chairs scraping. Someone laughing near the window, but at their desk, something tightened, sharpened. I heard Elias said that you were conducting a very inefficient experiment. Lena leaned her chin on her hand. And the results. The market is unstable. He finally looked at her. You should stop outsourcing your standards. Something hot and embarrassed moved through her chest. Margin flashed a note so bright she almost laughed. Compatibility increase detected. Fine, Lena said. I'm back. You were never hired. Cruel. Accurate. By mid-March, they had a routine. Before first period, Lena reviewed formulas while Elias pretended not to. Noticed when she came in with breakfast and set half of it on the desk between them. At lunch, if schedules aligned, he read, while she summarized a chapter aloud just to hear whether the logic held an open air. After school, they claimed the same corner of the library beneath the broken clock. On Saturdays, if neither of them admitted to arranging it, they somehow ended up at the municipal archive reading room, where the heating was poor and the tables were large enough for war. She learned that Elias drank terrible vending machine coffee only when deadlines approached. He learned that Lena revised essays by reading them backward from the last paragraph to the first. She learned that he hated being praised publicly because it made adults start planning his future with an appetite that resembled ownership. He learned that she had an instinct for structure and narrative and argument that she herself still distrusted. She learned that he sometimes stopped mid-problem to rub the bridge of his nose as if the world were too bright. He learned that when she got truly stuck, she became unnaturally polite, which was her version of panic. None of this was romance. At least that was what Lena told herself. Then Kieran and Celeste found them at the archive. The municipal archive was supposed to be neutral territory, high ceilings, dust, old paper, and volunteers who glared at anyone under 18 for breathing too loudly. She and Elias were drafting a proposal for the regional interdisciplinary challenge when the chair across from them scraped. Kieran sat down without invitation. Celeste remained standing behind him. Expression unreadable. We need the West. District literacy data, Kieran said to Elias as if Lena were furniture. Elias did not look up. Then file a request. The archive only grants one student group priority access. Her dataset. Your application blocked. Hours. Then submit earlier next year. Lena bit the inside of her cheek so hard she tasted blood. Kieran finally looked at her. You have attached yourself efficiently. Elias set down his pen. Lena touched his sleeve under the table. Once, lightly. Let me. She straightened in her chair. You say that as if you invented opportunism. Celeste exhaled. Almost a laugh, but smoothed it away. Kieran ignored her. You know what people are saying, right? Yes, Lena said. That your project proposals suddenly sound like presentation software wrote them after a concussion. Celeste closed her eyes for half a second. Kieran's ears flushed. Careful. No, Lena said. Softly. You be careful. I used to protect your embarrassment because I mistook it for my responsibility. The volunteer at the far desk looked up sharply. Everyone lowered their voices. Kieran leaned toward her. Don't pretend this is noble. You want what I want? Lena smiled without warmth. You wanted applause. I want this. The first time, Celeste spoke. Kieran outside. Here's them. Insert yo. She said outside. Heroes. Suddenly pushed each other hard. And out there. Volunteer. Celeste here. She said. Lena and your thesis is better, she said quietly. If you're using neighborhood library closures as the base problem, do not frame it as access alone. Frame it as navigation. Kids are drowning in information. The real deficit is guided pathways. Then she laughed before Lena could answer. Silence settled over the table again. Elias glanced at the doorway, then at Lena. She has been carrying him for months. Lena stared at the page in front of her. Guided pathways. In one sentence, Celeste had solved the structural weakness in their proposal, not because she pitied Lena, not because she wanted favor, simply because the work mattered more to her than team boundaries. Margin silver. Script appeared in the margin of Lena's notebook. Updated classification, not friend, not enemy. Potential parallel. Lena looked down at her own handwriting, filling the page beside Elias's sharp, disciplined print. Lena and Elias designed a pilot platform called Lantern Path, a low-cost,
School-based annotation system that broke.
dense textbook chapters into linked question chains, guided summaries, and peer discussion prompts. It was born partly from the margin interface and partly from Lena's fury at
How many students were called lazy when?
what they actually lacked was a map. Elias built the logic tree. Lena wrote the language architecture, the question, scaffolds, the user flow, the teacher, notes, and the presentation. When they practiced, Elias timed every section with a stopwatch and interrupted her whenever she drifted into ornamental phrasing. Nobody needs constellations of understanding, he said. People love constellations. Judges love clarity. Their first rehearsal was a mess. The second was worse. The third worked because they stopped
Trying to sound impressive and started.
talking to each other the way they actually did. What problem are you solving? The supervising teacher asked. The point where students stop asking because being confused in public feels
Expensive, Lena said.
and the point where teachers mistake silence for comprehension, Elias added. They won district and qualified for the provincial round. Kieran's team did not. By April, Lena's academic rank had climbed into the top 25. Juniors asked for her essay advice. Teachers who once dismissed her now wrote recommendation notes with suspicious
Enthusiasm.
Kieran still had charm, but his confidence no longer moved like weather. It moved like architecture under stress. Then came the forum post.
Late one.
Thursday night, Lena's phone filled with notifications. The anonymous thread claimed she had abandoned one genius for a better one, climbed by attachment instead of merit, and used romance as strategy. It included cropped photos, old messages, and just enough truth to make the lie efficient. The comments multiplied by the minute until the screen blurred. Old instincts returned with humiliating speed, shame, heat, the urge to disappear before someone could look directly at her and make the worst interpretation sound reasonable. Margin remained silent. Knock came at her window. She lived on the second floor. Nobody knocked at her window. Lena pulled the curtains aside. Elias stood on the fire escape landing with his backpack over one shoulder and a face like winter sharpened into human
Form.
She opened the window.
What are you?
Doing, preventing idiocy. It is midnight.
Yes.
That is not an explanation. It will have to do. Put on shoes. 10 minutes later they were on the roof of her apartment building. because the stairwell light was broken and the roof had a long low wall where residents sometimes came to dry blankets or cry privately. The city stretched around them in dim orange haze. Somewhere below, a dog barked once and gave up. Lena hugged her coat closed. Did you read
It? Yes. Are you furious? Yes.
At me, he turned his head so slowly she almost laughed from nerves.
Do you?
Honestly, think so little of my pattern recognition. The answer should have been
No.
The answer was still maybe. Elias held up his phone. Theo traced the first upload point to a student council media terminal. Marta is contacting the moderator. Celeste posted 2 minutes ago asking why anonymous. Cowards are obsessed with reducing women's work to male proximity. Lena stared at
Him.
You built a war room. A response.
Chain.
Despite everything, she laughed, once before pressing the heel of her hand against one eye. I hate, she said, carefully, that this still works on me. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Of course it works on you. It was designed to. She lowered her hand. Public humiliation is efficient. Elias continued. It isolates the target and entertains the crowd. That does not mean. It is true. It means it was engineered. Well, Lena inhaled slowly. The night air hurt her throat. I did do things for Kieran, she whispered. I did shrink myself to make him bigger. What if that means they are not entirely wrong? Elias leaned against the low wall, looking not at her, but at the city beyond them. If someone steals your work, he said, the theft is not evidence that you were worthless before it. If someone mistakes your generosity for proof of your inferiority, that is not an insight. It is a confession. Something in her chest gave way. The tears came then, not cinematic, not graceful, just tired. Furious tears that made breathing inconvenient. Elias did not move closer. Immediately, he gave her the dignity of a few seconds. Then he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a packet of tissues, and held it toward her without comment. Lena laughed through the tears. Do you carry these around all the time? No. I estimated the probability. That is somehow worse. It is effective. She took the tissues. Below them, a car passed. Somewhere far off, a train sounded. After a while, she asked, Why did you say my name that night at the gala? He was silent so long she thought he might refuse. Finally, he said, Because I was tired of watching you disappear in plain sight. She turned to him. He still was not looking at her. When someone spends enough time in the same classroom as you, he said, they start noticing things. Your questions in literature class, the way you wrote thesis, statements on scrap paper when you thought nobody could see. The fact that Kieran's proposals got dramatically worse whenever you were absent. A pause. And because you looked like you were about to let the room decide who you were. The wind moved a strand of hair across Lena's cheek. She tucked it back with cold fingers. That line about ghostwriting for mediocrity, she said. You planned it. No. Liar. A very small smile appeared.
Fine.
I revised it internally. She laughed. Again, more steadily this time. Margin. Finally returned, its voice softer than usual. External attack detected. Core. Trajectory stable. Lena looked out over the sleeping city and wiped the last of her face dry.
No, she murmured. Not stable.
Stronger. The provincial round of the interdisciplinary challenge took place in May. Lantern Path placed second overall and first in social impact design. Kieran's forum thread died under the combined force of student backlash, moderated deletions, Celeste's pointed, public comments, and the much more damaging fact that Lena and Elias kept producing visible work while anonymous. Accusers produced only fresh envy. But the cost lingered. Cameras seemed to find Lena more often now. Teachers said her name with a new edge of interest. Juniors whispered when she passed. The school had smelled narrative, and narrative was more intoxicating than truth. Then Principal Avery made it worse. He summoned the top 30 students to the assembly hall for a pre-admissions media briefing. Eastbridge's annual ritual of dressing adolescents in their futures and seeing which ones flinched. Representatives from major universities would attend. There would be short interviews, promotional clips, and human interest. Angles of phrase Lena mistrusted on principle. The first time around, she had barely registered the event. She had spent most of it fixing Kieran's tie and holding his water bottle. This time she sat in the third row with a legal pad and a resolve made of sharpened wire. University officers moved through the hall like expert gamblers pretending not to count cards. Halcyon's engineering dean cornered Elias almost immediately. Arden's humanities representative asked Lena about comparative rhetoric. Kieran hovered near the entrepreneurship booth. Celeste managed conversations so smoothly adults barely noticed it happening. During the open discussion, a representative from Arden asked Lena what had changed for her academically in a single year. She heard the silence gather. She saw Kieran glance up. She saw Celeste stop moving. The old answer rose automatically. Discipline, support, hard work, gratitude, safe nouns, approved nouns, margin. Remained quiet. Lena stood anyway. I stopped treating confusion like a character flaw, she said, and I stopped donating my time to people who called my strengths helpful extras. Instead of work, a ripple moved through the room. She kept going. I used to think asking for help made me smaller.
What?
Actually made me smaller was hiding what I did not know and calling that loyalty. This year I learned that serious people are not threatened by your questions. They build better answers because of them. One of the university officers began writing quickly. Principal Avery looked delighted in the way only administrators who smelled brochure material could. Across the hall, Elias did not smile, but his posture changed by one precise degree. Approval again, brief and exact.
The Arden
representative said, that is a remarkable answer. Lena sat down before her knees, could shake visibly. Afterward, in the crush of students and staff, Celeste found her near the side exit. You should know, Celeste said, that Kieran tried to start the rumor chain himself, then outsourced the dirtier work. When he realized direct involvement would make him look insecure, Lena leaned against the wall. How do you know? Because he asked me to soften the language? Celeste's mouth twisted.
I declined.
Lena stared at her. Celeste folded her arms. I should apologize. For what? For noticing what he was and still believing I could keep myself separate from the damage. She looked toward the hall where Kieran was laughing too brightly at something one of the deans had said. Some girls are taught that if they are smart enough, men like that won't turn on
them.
It is a stupid lesson. Intelligence is not immunity. Lena let out a breath. She had not realized she was holding. You do not owe me an apology for existing near
him, she said.
Celeste laughed once.
Dryly.
Good, because I hate apologizing in heels. Then, after a pause, your answer in there was excellent. So was your line on guided pathways. Celeste's eyes widened slightly. Then she smiled, not polite this time, but genuine and quick. Maybe, she said, after finals, we should discuss how badly Eastbridge trains girls to make themselves legible. Over coffee, over something stronger. They parted before the moment could turn. Sentimental. That night Lena wrote for 3 hours straight. Not notes, not speeches, not essays for grades. Something else. A long piece that braided together. Education, shame, visibility, class, performance, the cost of asking, and the terrible efficiency with which schools confuse polish for intelligence. She did not plan to publish it. She wrote because language had finally stopped feeling like a borrowed coat. When she finished, Dawn had reached the windows. Margin silver script appeared. At the bottom of the page, trajectory. Note, recovered voice recognized. Lena touched the line with one fingertip. 4. The first time, the system felt less like a machine helping her and more like a witness confirming she had returned to herself. Exams approached with the cruelty of weather. By late May, Eastbridge had become a fortress of sharpened pencils, bad coffee, and teachers who alternated between inspiration and threats. Lena stopped checking the forum. Kieran stopped trying to speak to her. Celeste transferred out of his project group. Elias developed the alarming habit of calling the hardest questions interesting. Failures. One evening, after a 6-hour revision session that left her half delirious, Lena dropped her head onto the desk and groaned, "Tell me one true and comforting thing." Elias considered, "Your paragraph transitions have become structurally elegant. That is not comforting to humans. It is to the right humans." She lifted her head enough to glare at him. "Try again." He capped his pen.
Fine. You're going to do better.
"Then you think?" The room went still.
Not
Because the words were dramatic. Because he never used reassurance.
carelessly.
Lena searched his face for irony and found none. "How do you know?" she asked quietly. "Because panic consistently underestimates preparation." He gathered the loose pages between them into one stack. "And because I have read your worst drafts, your finished work is dangerous." A pulse skipped in her throat. She looked down at the papers to hide it. Dangerous is a strange compliment. It is the highest kind. When the study room lights blinked, warning closure, they packed in. Silence. Outside, the evening air smelled faintly of rain on concrete. At the bus stop, Lena asked too casually, "Where are you applying, Halcyon?" "Engineering," Elias said, "in 2 backups. My parents can boast about if necessary." She smiled. "Still engineering."
You say that like,
"It is a personality defect. You say everything like it is a design specification."
and you, he said, are.
"Still, art and humanities. I am." "They will be lucky." The bus arrived before she could answer. The week before the final exams, Lena stopped sleeping.
Properly?
Not because she lacked preparation. Because she now had something to lose that was not humiliation. Her mother began, leaving cut fruit outside her door at midnight without comment. Her father asked each morning whether she wanted eggs or toast and pretended that was not love. Margin reduced its interventions to one infuriating line: consolidation phase. Trust retrieval. At 3 one morning, Lena gave up on sleep, walked to the all-night pharmacy, and came back to find someone waiting on the stoop of her building. Elias stood up as she approached. "You own a phone," Lena said faintly.
Yes.
"You could have used it." "I did."
You did not answer.
She checked her
Pocket.
6 missed calls, 3 messages. "I know you're awake. If you are currently revising instead of sleeping, reconsider. Open the door when you get back." Despite herself, she laughed. That sounds threatening. It was meant to. He held out a small paper envelope. Inside was a card no larger than her palm. On it, in Elias's exact handwriting, were 7 lines. Read the full question. Define the terms. Do not sprint past the
Obvious.
structure is not the enemy.
You have done harder things than the next.
3 days. Breathe before the first sentence.
Trust what you know.
Lena read the card twice before looking up. What is this? A pre-exam stabilization device. That is not what humans call gifts. It is efficient. She smiled down at the card until her vision blurred unexpectedly. "Elias,
What? If I fail anything?
I'm blaming your design."
You won't.
He hesitated, then added, "And if you panic in the exam hall, imagine me being disappointed in your margin usage." She burst out laughing so loudly that the upstairs light flicked on.
You are.
"Impossible," she said. "So I've heard." On the first day of exams, Lena tucked the card inside her transparent pencil case and did not touch it once. She did not need to. The moment the papers landed on the desk, panic surged and then broke against preparation. Margin's voice did not appear. No silver. Annotations.
No guiding lines.
Only the remembered shape of months of
Real work.
define the terms. Read the question. Trust what you know. In literature, she wrote as if opening a locked room. In history, she built arguments like staircases. In mathematics, she was not brilliant, but she was steady. And steadiness turned out to be enough. In science, she heard almost like a ghost Elias asking what was conserved and what only changed form. When the last paper ended, the students of Eastbridge spilled out into the heavy summer evening in waves of noise and relief. Some cried, some shouted, some called parents before they had even cleared the gate. Lena did not go home immediately. She went to the municipal archive. Not because it
Made sense.
because in both lives, some part of her had always run toward the places where she had learned who she was. Elias was already there. He stood beneath the broken clock in shirt sleeves, holding 2 cans of iced tea from the vending machine downstairs. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Lena said, "If you ask me to solve one more problem today, I will push you into the..."
Map drawer.
He handed her a can. "I came prepared for this possibility." She took it. Their fingers brushed. The contact was brief and electric enough to make her absurdly aware of her own breathing.
How?
Was math, he asked, survivable?
Yours annoying.
That means excellent. Usually, they sat at their usual table and drank terrible iced tea, while the archive volunteers pretended not to notice that 2 exhausted teenagers were smiling at nothing and everything. After a while, Lena said, "What if the second life thing was never about being better than the people who hurt me?" Elias turned the can slowly between his
Hands.
"What do you think it was about?" She looked at the long tables, the dust in the slanting light, the shelves full of records made by people who had wanted their lives to leave shape behind. "Maybe it was about not abandoning myself this time." He held her gaze.
Yes, he said.
When the results were released in July, Eastbridge nearly imploded. Servers lagged. Parents screamed into phones. Lena's score loaded slowly enough to feel theatrical. Then the numbers appeared. She had placed first in humanities across the district and within the top 5, province-wide overall. Her mother sat down abruptly on the hallway floor. Her father said one profanity with extraordinary reverence. Lena laughed and cried at the same time. Her phone rang. "Elias," she answered on the first breath. "Well," he said. "Well, what, Lena?" She looked at the screen, again, unable to stop smiling. "I did it." A pause. Then, very quietly, "I know." That was when she realized he already knew his own results too. The school would have called him immediately. "And you?" she asked. "First in science," he said. "Province-wide." Lena put a hand over her mouth. Then she screamed. Not elegantly. Not with dignity. She screamed so loudly her father dropped a spoon in the kitchen and the neighbor's dog started barking again. When she could speak,
She said, "Of course you are."
"Of course I am," he agreed, and for once the arrogance in it was purely earned. By afternoon, Eastbridge had hung banners over the front gate. University representatives arrived like migratory birds sensing favorable weather. Cameras appeared. Local media requested
Interviews.
Principal Avery called it a historic academic harvest, which sounded agricultural and ridiculous. The school wanted photos of its stars. Lena arrived in a simple blue dress because her mother said she looked brave. In blue, Elias arrived in uniform because he considered ceremonial dressing a needless variable. Kieran arrived too, admitted to a respectable business program, still polished, still smiling. But the light around him had shifted. He no longer stood at the center of the story. He knew it. So did everyone else. At the media session, a reporter asked Lena the question she had once dreaded in another life. You improved so. Dramatically, the reporter said, did you? Discover some kind of shortcut. The room held its breath. Lena remembered the Gala lights, the bent program booklet, the year of vanishing. She remembered the silver annotations in the margins of her notes and the card in her pencil case and the sentence Elias had spoken on a roof while the city slept. Public humiliation is efficient. She smiled into the microphones. Yes, she said. I did. Pens moved instantly. Cameras. Lean closer. My shortcut, Lena. Continued was discovering that asking real questions is faster than performing fake certainty. It was teachers who answered seriously, classmates who argued honestly, and the moment I stopped confusing sacrifice with love. The room went silent enough to hear the lights buzz. Then someone started clapping. Not a teacher. Not a parent. Celeste Rowan standing near the back in a cream blouse, hands coming together with cool, deliberate force. Others followed. The room filled. Across the aisle, Kieran looked as if applause had become a language he no longer spoke fluently. After the official interviews, scholarships began arriving in waves. Arden offered Lena a place with a merit package strong enough to make her mother sit down again. Halcyon all but annexed. Elias on site. District foundations called. 2 nonprofits asked whether Lantern Path could be piloted in their schools. Principal Avery suggested naming a study room after the Winter Ashford method, which made both of them visibly horrified. Then, because life remained committed to irony, one more rumor surfaced online that Lena and Elias were dating, that they had probably been dating for months, that her academic rise was just another prettier version of dependence. This time, Lena did not hide. Neither did Elias. He posted exactly one statement on the student platform under his real name. If you cannot imagine a girl becoming excellent without romantic explanation, that is not a mystery about her. It is an indictment of your imagination. The platform crashed under the response. Lena stared at the screen for a full 10 seconds before calling him. Was that, she asked when he answered? Your version of subtle. Yes, it is violent. It was meant to be. She laughed so hard she had to sit down on her bed. Then, because courage was still not a constant state, but a decision renewed in moments, she said, meet me tomorrow. Where? The archive. Obviously. What time? 3. I will be there. The next day, the city was hot enough to blur the air above the sidewalks. Inside the archive, the old radiators had finally gone quiet for summer, and the volunteers had opened 3 windows that let in the smell of dust, paper, and rain waiting somewhere far away. Elias was already seated under the broken clock with 2 iced teas and a stack of university forms. Predictable, Lena said. Punctual? He corrected. She sat opposite him, then changed her mind and moved to the chair beside his instead. That, more than anything she could have said, made him go still. Lena placed her hands flat on the table so she could not fidget them into nonsense. I keep thinking, she began, about that note from the first day. The one where I told you to wake me up? You wrote it to yourself, he said. I know, but you still followed the instructions. She turned toward him. You did that a lot this year. Not just in class. Every time I was about to disappear again, you refused to let me. He looked at the tabletop, then at her, as if choosing precision under pressure. I also criticized your paragraph openings without mercy. He said. You did. And your pacing in presentations? Yes. And your tendency to apologize to people who are inconveniencing you? Elias, he stopped. The air between them felt charged, dangerous, and the way bridges feel dangerous when you realize you're already halfway across. Lena drew in one slow breath. I do not need a rescue, she said. I know. That now, I do not need someone to carry my work or explain my worth. But she lost the sentence. Not because she lacked language, because she had too much of it. And none of it felt exact enough. Elias waited. That was the thing about him. His patience when he chose to spend it was devastating. Lena tried again. I love who I became beside you, she said. Not because you made me from nothing. Because you kept meeting me as if I was already real. Something shifted in his face. Not surprise. Not exactly. Relief, perhaps? After a long private weather, he set down the pen he had been holding. Good, he said softly, because I have been in love with you for an unreasonable amount of time. Lena stared. Unreasonable, she echoed. I'm trying. Not to say since before the gala, because that would make this conversation intolerably dramatic. Her laugh came out, half broken with joy. You said my finished work was dangerous. It is. You brought tissues to the roof. Yes. You made me an exam card. Yes. You posted a public threat in grammatically perfect sentences. I did. Lena leaned closer. That sounds very much like an unreasonable amount of time. His mouth curved. There's more, he admitted. I kept the first editorial you wrote for the school journal. Her eyes widened. You stole it. I archived it. That is a librarian's crime. It was evidence of what you were always going to become impossible to ignore. For a second, all the right. Difficult months between January and July. Seen together at once. Chalk dust and roof wind. Library table and silver. Annotations. Rumor threads and rehearsal. Disasters. Tears on tissue paper. Exam. Halls. Banners. Applause. The long patient. Work behind visible herself. Then Lena reached up, touched the side of his face with trembling fingers, and kissed him. It was not cinematic. The table edge got in the way. One of the volunteers dropped a stack of catalog cards in the next room. Elias's iced tea nearly tipped over. It was enough. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling with the stunned concentration of people who had just stepped into a future they had built with their own hands and still could not quite believe was habitable. Margin's voice appeared one last time, warm and clear. Second attempt. Cycle complete. Support route concluded. Independent trajectory secured. Lena blinked. Wait. A thin silver line traced itself across the margin of her university form. You no longer require translation. You can ask your own questions now. The glow faded. Margin. She thought. No answer came. Across the table, Elias was watching her carefully. What happened? Lena looked down at the empty edge of the page, then up at him. My training wheels came off, she said. He considered that, then nodded as if it made perfect sense. About time. She laughed, half sad and wholly grateful. They spent the rest of the afternoon filling out forms and pretending not to glance at each other every 30 seconds. When the archive closed, they walked home. By the river instead of taking the bus. The evening air smelled of rain at last. At the footbridge, Lena stopped and looked at the dark water moving below. In my first life, she said quietly, I thought the worst thing that could happen was being left behind. Elias stood beside her, hands in his pockets, waiting. It was not, she said. The worst thing was leaving myself behind and calling it devotion. He turned toward her fully, and now Lena thought of Arden and Halcyon in the same city. Of Lantern, Pat's pilot launch in autumn. Of Celeste's message promising coffee and revolution. Of her mother sewing a protective fabric cover for her acceptance. Letter as if paper could catch cold. Of the card in her pencil case. Of the note that had told a sleeping girl to wake up and not be handled gently.
Now.
The future no longer looked like a stage where someone else might erase her with
One sentence.
It looked like work, risk, language, and love that did not require shrinking. Now, Lena said, smiling into the wind, I intend to be very difficult too. Misplace. Elias laughed quiet, real, entirely his, and reached for her hand. She let him take it. Together, they crossed the bridge, not toward rescue, not toward revenge, but toward the long, bright labor of the lives they had chosen on purpose.